In response to a comment I made a few weeks ago where I emphasized that the Chinese police kill, on average, one person every 3 years, while the US police kill, on average, three people every day, approximately one every 7 hours, I received this caustic note from a viewer. Making a comparison of numbers killed by police in a country is not very valid unless the number of police killed in the course of their work is also disclosed. In countries with genuinely low gun violence, the police will be loath to use their guns themselves. In countries where police are regularly shot, you can expect police to react with a bit more fear. I disagree. Anyway, wherever you are, welcome to another of my takes on China, and I mulled this one over for a long time before making a response to it. But here's a more extended response than the one I sent him. I think this is a case of which came first, the chicken or the egg. Are police violent towards society because society is violent, or are society aggressive to police because the police show aggression to society? Now, if anyone can answer that question, they would have the solution to the gun problem in the USA. And let's be honest here, it's really only the USA that has such a problem with their police. And one must wonder why that is, because they're the same globally as they are domestically. Now, first of all, in the spirit of full disclosure, many people watching will already know this, but new subscribers may not. I was a police officer for 10 years. 5 years in central London, and then I transferred out of the city centre and I worked in the Essex County region for a further 5 years before I left the job and moved to Australia with a young family. Now, during my time there, I had some very interesting jobs. For a period of time, I did carry a firearm. That was unusual in those days, but unless you knew I was armed, you wouldn't have seen it. It was a snub-nose Smith & Wesson Police Special. It's this big. This is a small gun. It fits into a special pocket that we had in our uniform trousers. I never at any time carried it in a hip holster or anywhere else where it could be seen. And for 2 years, this firearm remained in my pocket as I either stood outside of an embassy, working in the diplomatic protection group, or I was traveling in advance of a member of the royal family to a venue where I would conduct security and perimeter checks before their arrival in the Royalty Protection Group. Now, both of these were pretty boring jobs, no more taxing than a security officer, but with a little more responsibility. For example, when the Iranian embassy siege happened in London, you can Google that, the police officer who was captured by the terrorists and held for several days and nights was a peer of mine. His service was a slightly different time, but we did meet. Our jobs were the same. While it might be a boring job, it's definitely not without its moments. It can get quite horrific. But back to the main point. In 2023, 253 police officers died while on duty in China. And I've been to a site which tells me how they died, and I'm sharing that site with you in the links. But it's in Chinese. It relates only to Guangdong, and depending on where you access it from, you might be forbidden to access it. I have accessed it in the past. Now I only get the forbidden page, even without my VPN. So it's quite a sensitive page, and I understand. But what was most interesting as I scanned down all the people who died in the service in Guangdong, not one of them died in violent circumstances. One of them was traveling to several cities in a short period of time, and he collapsed with exhaustion. One of them was actually playing basketball in his break time and collapsed. Presumably something happened to his heart. All the officers who died in service in Guangdong in 2023, not one died through violence. None were shot, none were beaten, none died as a result of injuries other than through a car accident. So yes, there is an issue of trust in police. Clearly, the people of China trust the police, will respect them. And this goes completely against the grain of the normal understanding of China's policing. We're constantly told China has an authoritarian police force, but the fact is the police are friendly, helpful, well respected, and as I've often pointed out, they're reluctant to do the job that we as Westerners would expect them to do, and that is arrest criminals or write tickets. They hardly ever do that. But you can, if you want to see them, go to any school, any day, and see there will be at least 2 of them as the kids go in or out at the end of the day. It's actually hard to arrest criminals when you can't find any. And you can't find any in China because street crime is virtually non-existent. It doesn't happen. So back to the point made in the comment, I would question why the police fear the people they are sworn to protect. If the police are afraid of the people they serve and protect, surely there's a fundamental flaw in not only the argument put forward by the person making this comment, but in the system under which they work, the system in which people live day to day. If people hate the police, then they will be violent towards them. If they're violent towards them, then the police will have to protect themselves. I was a police officer. It was 10 years. I never feared the people that I was protecting. I would sincerely hope that they wouldn't fear me either. I know some didn't like me. That's different to fear. If they did fear me, I'd consider that a failure on my part and my colleagues as well. So when I think back to my time as a police officer, 90% of it was spent helping people rather than harming people. That's what police are supposed to do, and in China they do. When the racially charged violence of the 1980s hit London, when the coal miners were on strike a couple of years later, and the government used the police, they used me to stop them, I felt it was time to get out. And I knew that the UK was going in a direction where the police were no longer serving and protecting the people who paid for them, the tax-paying public, but they were serving and protecting politicians and industry leaders. I knew it was time to get out, and I went to the other side of the world. If people fear the police in your country, it's not necessarily because the police are doing a bad job. It's because the system is totally and utterly failing you. It's your government, your society, and your laws that need changing, because the way it is now, police are required to carry guns and far too often called upon to shoot the very people that they're sworn to protect. I carried a gun only when my duties required it, for the protection of others, not for myself. And that's why I think something needs to change. And using China as a model is not a bad way to start. Thanks once again for watching my take on China, and I will see you next time. Bye for now.